Hey everyone, and welcome back to Suited Aces Poker, where every week we watch hundreds of poker vlogger hands and bring you 10 of the best. This week, we are back at school. We've got lessons on bluffing, lessons on bet sizing, and lessons on double, if not triple, checking the board. So without further ado, let's make a start. At number 10 this week, we are kicking things off with Doug McCusker, who's playing at the Capital Casino up there in Sacramento, California. He's in a 1-3 cash game, and it must have felt like all of his birthdays came at once.
So we're in the game for 1,000. We have about 500 in our stack. There's an early limper. I raised to 15 with Jack 10 suited, and we end up getting 4 people putting in the call for the $15. So we're going to end up going 4 ways to a flop with $64 in the pot. Flop comes out Jack, Queen, Jack. So beautiful flop. I mean, what more can you ask for? It's check to me. I put out a standard C bet of $20, just trying to get some action and see where people are at. Player on the button, who was the conservative player who folded last hand, puts in the call. Everybody else folds out. So now we're heads up to the turn. And the turn card is a Jack of spades. So good luck on sucking out on this one, guys. I bet $40. I'm just hoping and praying that my opponent calls, because if he does, that means he has a queen in his hand. And if he has a queen in his hand, he is not going to fold to a blank 6 on the river. So he has about 270 left in his stack, and I want it all. I jam, and he just like goes into the tank, and he was in the tank for probably close to 2 minutes. And for me, if I have a queen or better in this spot, I'm definitely going to be calling. You can't really put somebody on quad jacks, especially the way the hand has been played. So after a very, very long tank, my opponent says call, and he throws in a chip, and I'm more than happy to show him the Jack 10. He rolled over that he had pocket aces, and it took him that long to call. That's the third nuts, and unless he put me on pocket queens or something, or of course the Jack. Win a very nice pot. I'm glad I overbet this thing. Years ago, I might have only gotten for a smaller bet, but in that situation, an overbet works perfect because the player is going to be calling you. He either has a full house or he doesn't.
At number 9 this week, and Frankie, one of the 3 next-gen poker boys, is playing in a 1-3 game at the Texas Card House in Dallas. And this one seems to play a little bit like it's a home game.
Under the gun with another pocket pair, I put in a limp to $3. The hijack raised it up to $15, folds back to me, and I put in the call. Flop comes ace, 6, king. This is like the same situation again. I mean, what a flop. Poker gods are really helping me out after that brutal cooler earlier. I check, and we see a bet of $40 from the hijack player, and I put in a smooth call. The turn is another ace, the ace of spades, a very similar hand now. I mean, come on. I check, and unfortunately, this time the hijack player checks it back. The river is the 10 of spades, and we see some banter.
You want to see one of them? Which one?
Right?
You want to see one of them? Yeah.
He actually shows me a card at my meetup game. He shows me the queen. I don't really know what that means, but I hope he has got ace queen. I rip it all in for his remaining $100 stack. He snap calls, shows me jack queen for the straight. What a cooler. I show him the boat, and we take home the last part of the night. Unfortunately, he was short stacked, so we are still down on the session.
At number 8 this week, and Andrew Neeme is in a 5-5 game at the Hustler Casino in California. And let's be honest, we've all been Andrew's opponent in this one.
Before the hand is dealt, I announce this is my last hand at this table and throw the straddle on, and there's a limp before our misery finally comes to an end. We suffered through all those other pocket pairs and finally get rewarded with the best hand ever created, pocket aces, and in the straddle no less. There's 2 limps to me and I make it $50. The first limper folds and the second limper calls. Heads up to an uneventful 9-6 deuce rainbow. I bet $80 and my opponent wants to see one more card at least. Turns another 9, and with not that many draws available, I slow it down with a check while my opponent decides he wants to do some betting. He makes it $140, which of course we're calling, and we're off to see a river card. just in case there was any doubt here, the river is an ace, ensuring us the winner versus any hand that isn't pocket nines. I don't want to just come out firing though, in case my opponent has the odd 7-8 suited. If he has bluffs, we want to allow those to keep firing, and if he has a really good hand, then we're going to win a bunch of money anyway. If he has a mediocre hand like pocket 8s or 10s or something, I don't think we're going to be able to derive a lot of value anyway on this river card. After I check it, my opponent says those magical words.
All in.
I call.
Sick one. Number 7 this week, and close to broke, is at the Texas Card House there in Austin, Texas. He's playing in a 2-5 cash game. And is anyone able to find a call with a 5-bet on the flop?
I've never strayed you folks away from the truth, and I promise you today, this very first hand is the most incredible hand we've played in the entire Texas trip. I know the comments are going to go crazy from how ridiculous this hand is and just how ridiculous this setup was. Early position decides to raise to $15. Under the gun +2 decides to make the call. Folds over to me in the small blind. We look down at pocket 7s. Gonna go ahead and be defending here pretty much every pair, it feels like. The big blind decides to make the call as well, and we're off to a flop, hoping we can ink a beautiful, beautiful set. And the flop comes just what the community ordered. Jack 8-7 with 2 diamonds, flopping bottom set on an unbelievably coordinated board texture. I decide to check to continue playing in flow. The initial raiser decides to c-bet for $45. Folds back over to me. I'm going to go ahead and put the raise in here, considering there's a ton of massive semi-bluffs that my opponent can have. Some kind of drawing hands, and I need to get as much money in the middle as I can early with the best hand. I decide to raise here to $150. The big blind decides to smooth call off about $1,100 stack. When it gets back over to the initial raiser, unfortunately, he doesn't like the price of $150, so he decides to make the 3-bet, the coveted post-flop 3-bet, $500 to go. Man, alarm bells are going off, but I feel like it'd be a little too nitty to just make the fold at this point. Sure, my opponent can have a hand that's made like 10-9 suited, and he can have us crush here with a hand like jacks or 8s, but there is an off chance that he can be a little aggressive with the flush draw, or a little aggressive with the combo draw, or maybe he has top 2 pair. I decide to just make the call. When it gets back over to the big blind, again, another unfathomable occurrence as a big blind decides to jam $1,100. Everything in this hand has not happened according to plan. Besides the fact that I flopped a set, everything else has just backfired on me. After the big blind decides to jam, the initial raiser, again, this hand can't get any more ridiculous, decides to jam for the unbelievable 5th bet on the flop for $3,500. The alarm bells are off. I don't need to be a GTO superstar to make a massive fold here. I end up folding bottom set, showing it to the table as they're pretty impressed. My opponent in the big blind decides to show ace-9 of diamonds, and my opponent in the initial raising position shows 10-9 offsuit. Definitely a spewy open from early position. I'm not gonna lie to you. Sorry if you're watching the video. You know, that has to mean a lot coming from the spewiest, puntiest guy you guys know myself. But man, that is a little interesting to see that hand specifically. Anyways, they run up 2 boards. I would have won one of the boards as it did come out with a diamond, but it did follow with the board pairing card. Ridiculous spot, and happy we got away unscathed, I guess.
At number 6 this week, and Lex Ozias. Lexo is playing in the 2-5 game at the Texas Card House in Dallas. And we needed to double check and triple check the board on this one.
At 11:53 p.m., there's a $25 straddle under the gun. There is 3 callers, and I'm in the big blind with pocket kings. I raise it up here to $200. The straddler calls, and all of the limpers call. So we go 5 ways to a $1,000 pot, which comes out 9, 4, deuce, 2 spades. Going 5 ways to the flop at a position with a huge overpair is a recipe for disaster, especially when you're super deep. So I decide to check on this board for some pot control, and the action checks all the way around. The turn is an 8, and I'm just going to try to check here, get to showdown. It checks all the way to the cutoff who puts out a bet. He makes it $500, and this guy had been playing pretty solid all night. I don't really like this spot. I think he could have turned a set, maybe 2 pair, but it is possible he could be semi-bluffing here with maybe Jack 10 for a straight draw. Maybe he's just betting a hand like Ace 8 or 7-8 for protection, given the fact that everybody checked to him twice. Facing a $500 half pot size bet, I definitely cannot fold my hand the way I played it, but I'm not really liking this spot. This player has been playing solid the entire night, so I feel like he's going to have a pretty strong hand here. I make the call, and the hijack player makes the call for $500 as well, with only $200 left in his stack. Playing another massive pot here, over $2,500 in the middle. The dealer collects the chips and puts out the river card, which is the king of clubs. We make top set the nuts, the best hand possible. I decide to lead out small here for $700. With such a strong hand on the river, I don't want to let the action check all the way around, so I bet out small here, and now the cutoff goes into the tank. He thinks for a while. With about $6,000 left in his stack, he reaches for some calling chips and then reaches for some raising chips and puts in more money. He puts in a raise to $2,200. When my opponent raises on this river, he's representing the nuts, and I thought I had the nuts with top set, so I immediately get sick to my stomach that I must have misread the board. There must be some odd straight that got there, or maybe a backdoor flush, so I studied the board for a while trying to see, is there any hand that beats me? After about 30 seconds of squinting and going over all the possible combinations, I come to the fact that no, I have the nuts. Pocket Kings is the best possible hand you can have here. My heart rate starts to settle down, knowing that I am always going to be winning this pot. I glance over at the cutoff stack with a little less than $4,000 left. I'm almost positive he has a set of 9s or a set of 8s, so I'm going to be going for the max here, and I rip it all in for $10,000, covering my opponent. The cutoff looks visibly frustrated. However, he puts in the call. I show Pocket Kings for top set, and he shows Pocket 8s for a set as well. Set over set for the biggest pot I've ever played in my entire life. With all the money in on the river, the pot was almost $15,000, which is just insane. Just about 3 years ago, I was playing $200 or $300 pots at 1-2, and now we just won the biggest pot of our life, $15,000 being shipped our way. A huge cooler for my opponent, holding the third nuts versus the first nuts. Sometimes the stars align to lose the maximum, and then sometimes the stars align to make the perfect storm to win the biggest pot of your life. It was a $25 straddle, 5 callers. He turned a set, and I rivered the offsuit king to win the biggest pot of my entire life. I feel like I'm in a dream right now. My stack is over $24,000.
At 5, close to broke, is at the Texas Card House, playing in that 2-5 cash game. And we're going to ask you, what would you do? Would you bet the river anyway? Let us know in the comments.
Early position decides to limp here. Somebody in the cutoff decides to isolate to $35. The button calls. I look down at 4-5 of hearts. I decide to make the call. And so does the early position limper. We're going off to the flop. The flop comes Ace 5 King Rainbow, and there is one heart out there. The action surprisingly checks through. I would imagine that this is a board texture that's going to absolutely crush one of these isolation raisers' range, and if not, at the very least, if they have some kind of gut shot, they should be firing at this board. Leads me to believe they have some semblance of showdown value that they want to get to, and we see the turn card that comes at 3 of spades. I decide to take advantage of this spot and go ahead and bet here as a bluff. I bet for $50, early position decides to fold. And now the cutoff and the button both make the call. Obviously never good here, looking to get bailed out by a pair, a 2-pair, or I don't know, something on the river that could be a scare card I can lead on. And the river comes just that, as it comes a 5 of clubs. We now make trips, we have a monster hand, and I'm looking to go massive here. I want to bet the size of the pot at the very least, maybe even more players are. At this point, I look down at my hand, and is it 4-6 of hearts? Is that a 6? Is that a 6 that I see? Well, we're pretty effed at this point. I go from thinking that I have a massive value hand to I have 6 high. Well, I'm not going to bluff at this, considering how, like I said, sticky these players can be post-flop. So I decided to just check it down, and the action actually checks through. And to our surprise, the winning hand that was tabled was King Jack suited. So I guess if we didn't look back at our hand and we just fired the river, I would have got 2 folds. But alas, we are here. And look, even I make mistakes, and that was a pretty egregious one.
Number 4 this week, and Mariano is playing in a 10-20 home game in Beaumont, California. So we're guessing the opponent has aces. What do you think?
I open King Jack to 50, someone calls in late position, and then the button min raises to 100. The small blind calls the 100, and it's back on me. I toss in the extra 50 because why not? And so does the player behind me. So 4 of us going to a miraculous flop, guys. Queen 10-9, 2 diamonds. Literally could not pick a better flop. Action checks to the razor, fingers crossed that he keeps betting, and he does, $250. The small blind calls the 250, and of course I'm gonna raise. Super advanced play on my part. I make it 750. Player behind me folds, and it's back to the button. As if this situation wasn't sweet enough already, he announces another raise, this time $2,000. Small blind folds, and it's my turn again. Well, it seems like we probably have the same hand at this point, but in case we don't, I just move all in for his remaining $3,000, and as expected, he makes the call. I immediately announce my hand, but my opponent doesn't seem happy about it.
I have King Jack.
God damn it.
With over $10,000 on the line, we're off to see a turn in river. So yeah, pretty much the worst possible cards we could see, but somehow, some way, the button mucks his cards. No idea what he had, but of course I'll take it, no questions asked.
On to the top 3 for week 7, and at number 3, it's your boy Ethan, Rampage Poker. He's playing in Nashua, New Hampshire this week at the Boston Billiard Club and Casino. He's playing in a 2-5 cash game and gives us a really good example of why bet sizing is so important.
Hand following that one, it's going to be a little bit different, as I guarantee you that there will be some blood in the streets. I pick up King Queen offsuit, I'm on the button, and I straddle the $10. There's a big blind player who limps, action folds to me. From my perspective, seems like this player is happy to be involved in the action, so I put in a raise in position to $50 with a good hand, and he decides on a call. We're going heads up to a flop of 6-5-5 rainbow, 1 spade out there. He checks it over to me, and with king high, I decided to just check this one back. Not a whole lot going for me, and also can assume that sometimes king high can be good. When the turn comes, the 10 of spades brings in the backdoor flush draw now, and now this player bets out $60. Well, I didn't check the flop to fold on this turn, and I check my cards here at this point to see if I have spades, as I beat spade draws as well. Here, I decide on just a call as I don't have any spades in hand. For $60 to go, let's go to a river with king high. The river comes one of the most inconsequential cards you could ask for. It is a deuce. As brick as it gets, and I'm expecting a big bet from this player, and I've got to expect to hold on if he's bluffing. But he doesn't do that. He sizes down to $75. 1/3 pot bet. That is certainly aggravating, as I expect bluffs to bet a little bit bigger and for value bets to size smaller. Calling with king high here is never recommended, but I go with my gut. I go with my initial read. I guess I really only beat missed draws like straight or in flush draws. So, I don't know, $75. Let's close my eyes. I stick it in for a call. This player shows us 8-7 for 8 high. King high is good. Found a really lucky situation and scenario where I made a hero call with king high, and it ended up being the right decision. It's really rare to run into that situation in poker, and really happy to catch it on the vlog for you guys.
At number 2, Brad Owen is at the Aria in Vegas playing in a 5-10 cash game. And this is a lesson for all of us on how to bluff.
We've got 8-6 suited in the big blind. The hijack min raises to 40. This is an odd amount. Small blind, who's been 3-betting a lot, makes it 120. This is another really small sizing. My sense is that neither player's all that strong. I could easily wait for a better hand to get involved, but on a scale of 1 to 10, That wouldn't be very fun. My image is good since I've only 4-bet with hands at the top of my range so far, and I haven't even 3-bet in some situations that I could have. I take advantage by putting in a cold 4-bet to 400. Usually, we'd want to do this with an ace in our hand. Today, we're living on the edge. This move will look a lot like aces, kings, queens, ace-king, and then some ace-queen or ace-5 through ace-deuce suited occasionally as bluffs. I expect it to get through for me pretty often. It doesn't this time. The hijack calls for 360 more, then the small blind calls for 280 more. This is a rare 4-bet multi-way pot. My perception of the hijack's min raise must have been way off. It might even be trapping with aces. If not, you could have another strong pocket pair like kings, queens, or jacks. Small blind on the other hand will probably never have aces. You could have other strong pocket pairs though. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes ace-5-3 with 2 hearts. It's pretty terrible for our actual hand, but it smashes our range, including the hands that we should have been 4-bet bluffing with. What doesn't do well on this flop is the hand that I actually chose to 4-bet bluff with. We've got nothing except a backdoor straight draw. At least any deuce, 4, 7, or 9 will help us improve. Small blind checks. I take a stab at it for 500 like I would if I had aces, ace-5, ace-king, and ace-queen. You saw me also bet this amount in a 4-bet pot with queens on a king-high board previously. My bet doesn't necessarily mean much by itself, but I'm hopeful that this could get most pocket pairs that miss sets to fold. The hijack is thinking for a very long time about what to do. It doesn't seem like he's contemplating a raise. It feels more like he doesn't want to fold a mediocre hand for only 500, but I'm not the only person that he has to be concerned about beating right now. He still has another opponent in the small blind that he has to consider. After a minute of tanking, the hijack calls. There's no reason for him to tank that long with aces if he was trapping pre-flop. You'd think that his decision would be easy, and he'd call somewhat quickly to continue setting the trap. Instead, the hijack at least appeared to be genuinely on the fence about whether to call or fold. I don't think that he's that good of an actor. If he is, he deserves an Oscar for nailing the subtle things that players do when they're making difficult decisions. The hijack might have something like kings or queens, and it's just calling one time for a relatively small amount to see how the rest of this hand plays. Small blind folds immediately. It's down to heads up in a pot that's already large. The turn is the queen of spades, making things very interesting. Again, I can have a ton of strong hands, including aces, queens, ace-queen, ace-5, and ace-3. After seeing my opponent tank when facing a flop bet, coupled with the fact that he didn't 5-bet pre-flop, I've ruled out him having aces and significantly discounted him having ace-king because those are pretty straightforward calls to make on the flop. He probably has ace-queen suited, kings or queens. There are 2 combos of ace-queen suited, and there are 3 combos of queens that the player could have for a total of 5 combinations that'll never fold if I take one more shot as a bluff. Meanwhile, there are 6 combinations of pocket kings that my opponent will have to auto-muck if I bet again. Even if my read on the flop was wrong and the opponent has ace-king, he's not going to like seeing me put more money in the pot because he'd be calling to basically chop at best. There's also some tiny chance that the hijack has a hand like jacks. With 11 total combinations that are the most likely ones that my opponent will have, and me surmising that he'll fold 6 of them, I put in another borderline suicidal bluff attempt, announcing a bet of
1,400? Yep. Take the house, what's that? 1,400.
It doesn't get much more interesting than this. I'm putting almost everything on the line. If we can win the pot half the time or more, it's a great play because we're risking 1,400 to win 2,200. I can talk about my reads on situations all day, but in reality, I'd never suggest that anyone put themselves in this position. I've invested 2,300 in a hand that I had no real business being in the first place. If I get called here, I'll have 1,700 in my stack, and I'll have to shut down on the river. That means I'll be stuck 3,300 on the session. I don't have too much time to consider how bad I'll feel if I lose, because the opponent snap folds, we get the Hail Mary bluff through in the clutch, our line looks like we have the nuts or something close to it, when really, we get lucky to take down a large pot with only 8 high. It's difficult to put into words how relieved I am to immediately get the fold, but you can see my hand shaking as all the adrenaline is coursing through my body. This one gets us above the even mark, and that's where we're going to stay.
And at number 1 this week, at the Seminole Casino in Coconut Creek, Florida, playing in a 5-10 cash game is Harry B. And if you're going to back into a hand, well, my goodness, Harry, this is the hand to do it with.
This is literally probably the coolest hand that I've put on the channel so far. It folds to me, and I'm on the button with 8-4 suited. And yes, 8-4 suited isn't open on the button. The only customer I have is the big blind, so we're going heads up to a flop. The flop provides us absolutely no help. The flop is queen 10-5 with 1 spade. So all we really have is some backdoor flush draws and some straight draws. When she checks it over to me, I'm sure 8 high is not good here, so I decided to throw out $25, planning on barreling on any flush card or any straight card, and she does decide to make the call. We're off to see a turn which is a very good turn. We turn a straight flush draw with the 7 of spades, literally one of the best possible cards we could have asked for. So when she checks over to me, this is a card that I 100% am not going to be shutting down on. We have so much equity, and right now all we have is 8 high. So definitely want to be putting in a bet here. As for bet sizing, I think this is a spot that an overbet makes a lot of sense for one of two reasons. One is we can fold out some hands that are marginally beating us, such as like a 10x or maybe even some queen x. I don't think any straight draws are going to continue on an overbet. And if we do get called and we do brick the river, it's pretty safe to assume that she does have a strong hand, so she'll be calling off on a lot of runouts. So with that being said, once again, I think an overbet is definitely the best play here. I decided to throw out $150. There is a lot of rivers that I'm going to be shutting down on, but let's hope that we do not get one of those. Praying that we can complete our straight or our flush, but why don't we just complete both of them? The river is a 6 of spades. Are you kidding me? We literally back ourselves into a straight flush. The most disguised straight flush imagine, like, is literally crazy. Action does start off on the small blind player. And what in the world? If this hand couldn't get any better, she decides to lead out for $300. What the heck is going on? We're sitting here with the absolute nutter butters. We're not losing. What in the world is going on? I look over at her chip stack and she definitely has some more chips to be played with. With around $1,000 behind after the $300 bet, I think there's only one bet here that makes a lot of sense, and that is all in. Even though it is a pretty big overbet, the reason being is if she's leading on the river for this sizing, she only has one of two hands. She only has a really strong hand that's going to be calling off a large bet, or she has nothing. So if she has nothing, she's not calling a raise regardless, and if she has a super strong hand, why not just go for the max? So I decide to go all in. Before I could even finish my sentence, she pretty quickly announces call. And obviously, we're going to be winning this one. She quickly tables queen 10, so she had us absolutely smoked on the flop. But luckily for us, we hit the most nutty, disgusting run out I could have ever imagined. And luckily at Seminole Casino Coconut Creek, we also hit a high hand. So that is going to be a few extra hundred in our pocket. But this is by far one of the most nutty hands I have ever played, and we get the absolute maximum.
Very nice, Harry B. Very nice. Well, that's it, folks. That's another week in the bag. Thank you, as always, for watching. We really appreciate your support. Before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out a bunch, and we appreciate every subscription that we get. Until next week, good luck at the felt.